Alright, here's some more info on those 1920s Hotchkiss light machine guns. I just received this book in on what I believe to be the earliest of all these guns, although it is actually dated 1926, if it'll focus, which is interesting because this is based on the earlier model, whereas this one, which is dated 25, seems to be based on the guns after it. So this is actually one that was for Brazil. They've got their coat of, I'm not sure what. I don't think you can focus on the detail, but it actually does say Republic of Brazil, etc., etc. So the interesting thing about this one is it does have a nice picture of what it identifies as the 1921 version. And if I compare that to this later book, or earlier book, what I thought to be, and I think still believe to be, the 1922 version here. So it looks like the major differences, or really perhaps the only differences, is sling, forend, and a flash hider. Because this one has none of those. You've got no sling, you've got no forend, you've got no flash hider. So, anyway, onto this gun. So this is positively identified on the first page of the book as the 1921 version. And I'm assuming the 1922 is in fact the Greek version. There's a good bit of info in here. Of course, I'd have to translate it all. Probably half of this is just sales. Interestingly, there's a fold-out chart for trajectories for the 1895. Don't really know why. There also is a table for this gun, but this is in 7mm. It's not in 8mm, so unfortunately it's not as useful as you might expect. The real gem here, though, is in the very back of the book. Let me get this all spread out. Have to move this. And this is a nice full color pop-out chart with labeling. Of course, it's probably not going to focus now, but so I was examining this along with some of these stripped down diagrams. Overall, the internals seem pretty similar. The exact shape and design of the locking link and the actual shoulder or locking piece is different, it seems. The bolt carrier is different in that it shallows out, and then it gets thicker here, shallows out, and again thicker, back to full diameter, and it almost looks like there's some sort of threaded something going on in here. Compare that to my Turkish one, where it's pretty much full diameter and then it steps down and back up once for the piston rings. So it does look a little bit different there. The regulator, of course, looks different from the Turkish ones, and it does look like it might be different from the Greek 1922 versions as well, because they're more like this, where it's just a double sort of a cylinder shape, as opposed to this wedge, which what looks like a rotating disc, almost like those Russian guns you see later on. Now the real changes come in the fire control group. The actual trigger looks pretty similar, pretty much the same. The rate reducer system is very different though. You can see they've got these gears, and I don't know what this rear one does, and then it's got a gear to the main disc, which is actuated by the bolt carrier. And then the actual piece that locks the bolt back to reduce the rate of fire is very similar to the one on the Turkish guns, but it's reversed. This one actually locks at the front, and I guess is actuated at the rear. Well, this one is still actuated at the rear with that roller, but it locks up at the rear too. It doesn't lock up at the front at all. You can see we have our discs and cylinder here, as opposed to whatever gear mechanism is going on in this one. Pretty interesting. They're also, all the depictions are showing round nose bullets in all of this, which is also pretty interesting. You can see there's some more cutaways here. So it looks like it still has this, this sort of disc with the channel in here, and then it's got perhaps a gear on this side. I don't know, or maybe these are two different styles. I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not sure what the benefits are. So, pretty interesting though. Alright, so here is the bolt carrier as shown in one of their takedown sort of parts diagrams. And you can compare it directly with this one. You can see the difference in the steps. This just kind of steps down where that has a nice taper. Then it's much straighter. And it's got a bigger bulge, it looks like earlier. Straight for a little while, taper down, straight, taper back up. And they don't have any piston rings illustrated, as opposed to, you know, this. Another thing I wanted to note is that on this diagram, it clearly shows the barrel screwing in with a very different set of threads as opposed to the later models. These look like normal, fine, sort of bolt action rifle or something screw threads. I've seen some of the 1922 barrels, and they seem to have a much wider, heavy sort of quick change thread, though it doesn't seem to be interrupted. And that itself is, I think, a little bit thinner than this sort of interrupted thread these Turkish barrels have on the 1926. So that seems to be another thing to note.